This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Friday, July 15th, 2022. And my guest is the awesome Chris from Spurt. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Hello, I'm a little bit sweaty, a little bit tired. It's been a long week, and it's very hot in the UK, which we're just not used to. So, dying, absolutely dying.
But you have a beer, so you're ahead of the game right here.
That's the thing. We do good quality British lager, so that is definitely helping out with the situation.
Fantastic. So as you saw from my topics, it's been a busy week. I want to spend the bulk of this talking about Nothing Phone 1 and of course on the MacBook Air M2. But there's a bunch of other stuff we have in here that are more newsy, and we can jump onto them. And you've played with some of the stuff we're going to discuss as well, like the Xiaomi phone that I also have. And I would love to hear your thoughts on that interesting Nokia built-in earbud dumb phone thing, because that's
extravaganza
cool.
The Express Audio. Yeah, it's different, definitely. It's well, I guess that the subject for today, the topic, is definitely gimmicks on smartphones and feature phones, I guess.
Yes.
Some of them are better than others.
Except for the MacBook Air, which is kind of the only thing in there that's pretty, I guess, not gimmicky, or maybe it is. I don't know. Is it gimmicky? Yeah. I don't know.
No, I think that's actually just straightforward, good old laptop shenanigans. It's all good.
For sure. So jumping into Nothing Phone 1, obviously after weeks of hype, we've covered it here on the podcast, week after week it seems. We finally now have an official launch of this phone with lots of fanfare and some hands-ons. Do you have a phone yet?
I haven't got the actual phone, but I did go to the launch event here in London. It was in a dodgy little side street in the charming King's Cross area.
And super hot too, because of the weather. God, yes. Yeah.
Thankfully, that we did spill out onto the street, which was nice, because for a bit of it, we got shuttled indoors into a tiny little room with no aircon, and it was hotter than hell. And so the bit where if you actually watch the launch, the bit where Colpier walks in, and does his little hello to the crowd. We were outside at the bar, just sweating buckets at that point, safely away from it all.
That's hilarious. Well, I saw some of it and heard about some of it. I read John Porter's report at The Verge, which I thought was really interesting because, he was a little snarky at the end, which is always fun. But look, the reality is we know more about the phone. I have one coming. We actually have one at Pocket now, right now, but I can't talk to you about it. It's not in my hands. We'll have a review soon, but I'm getting one as well, I think, at some point, like as a second wave for the podcast, which is great. And I'll let you folks know more about it. But I think that we have enough out there now. We've both read enough that I think we can form an opinion. And I'm actually very impressed. I feel like this is exactly once you remove the hype, this is exactly what I was expecting from Carpe. It's essentially another Nord, right? It's another one of those premium mid-range phones that doesn't cut any corners, as great value, with the added benefit here, if you want to call it a benefit or a gimmick, of this light show in the back, right? And this cool design. So that's kind of gravy. I personally, if this had been a Realme phone that has some cool paint job on the back, spec-wise and value-wise, I'd be happy as pie.
Yeah, definitely. It seems to be, certainly from the early reviews that have gone through, a solid sort of 8 out of 10 mid-ranger. Got most of the same specs, as you say, the likes of the OnePlus Nord 2T and lots of other Xiaomi phones and other bits that are around at the moment. But of course, it is the flashing lights that have stolen all the headlines, because that's been the hype machine for several months now. I can't even remember when they did the first teaser, but it seems like a long, long time ago.
And frankly, I'm not sure I don't really care that much about that. To me, I'm just happy to see a phone that pays attention to detail. And here's what I'm talking about. The even bezel all the way around the screen, right? The aluminum frame, the Gorilla Glass front and back. These are phones in that price point that make a lot of compromises on these things. Although Oppo with the Reno series is going back to a more premium material and build, for a while there, the Reno phones are all plastic. And I was considering they started being really almost luxurious. It kind of had degraded to like fake luxury, and now it's back. And I feel that's something that's been missing from this mid-range or premium mid-range experience, is that too many compromises are being made, right? We're getting things like, bad materials and bad decisions, like big chins on the bottom of displays and things. So seeing this phone, even though it does look a bit like an iPhone, but seeing this phone having all the right materials and attention to detail and, a decent processor, OIS on the main lens, wireless charging, to me, that checks all the boxes of what I expect a phone to have. Even, at the mid-range level, I feel that I expect all this at flagship level, but I'm starting to expect it at the mid-range, at the upper mid-range, which I think is where this phone positions itself. But the price is very exciting considering all you're getting. And it looks like, we're getting a pretty clean build of Android. And so far, people who have tested the camera have said, it's not outstanding in any way, but it's not horrible, which is pretty much what I would expect. So, all of this is positive to me. But then on top of that, you add the glyph stuff like this lighting show in the back. And I mean, cool, right? Some people are going to be excited about it. I personally don't care. I think maybe I need to use it to care. I don't know. What do you think?
Okay, so as far as the light show up stuff goes, that they needed to do something like that to grab all the headlines. Otherwise, it would have just been another mid-range,
another Nord. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Personally, I mean, I've played around with it, and I don't really get the point of it because they're sort of selling it as a notifications device, basically. But I'm not really sure why you wouldn't just have the screen up so you can see notifications as they pop in, see exactly what app is notifying you, who's getting in touch with you. Instead, you've got to have this weird sort of Morse code light show going off telling you which app's getting in touch with which person. And how is that like any better than just actually reading it on the screen? I'm not really sure.
It's a gimmick, right? But I think
it is a gimmick.
That's a selling point. I think that's the icing on the cake. Because at the core, they didn't sacrifice the core, which I didn't think Carl would do, but it's a big challenge as a first-time company, like a newcomer in the business, to not have to make the compromises. They didn't make the compromises. And I think that speaks to Carl Pei's attention to detail and his relationships in the industry that made it possible to have a display with an even bezel around, right? To have the right components to build this phone and to sell it at the right price point. Now, for all we know, they're losing money on each phone. I mean, I don't know, right? But I doubt that they are. Carl Pei is too much of a business person for that to happen.
Oh, yeah.
But I bet you the margins are pretty thin. So, I think in that sense, I'm very satisfied. I'm very happy with what I'm seeing. Now, the glyphs and it's gimmick, but it does distinguish the phone. When you pull that phone out in public, even if you don't have the light show going, people are going to notice, right?
Oh, yeah. And so obviously it's one from the marketer perspective because everyone's talking about this phone. Everyone's writing about this phone. As you say, whip it out in the pub. People are going to be like, whoa, what's this crazy disco phone you've got going on here?
Yeah.
And then, word of mouth is going to spread. So from that, I guess from the financing perspective, they've got a lot of backers by the sounds of it. The Casey Neistats and all the rest of it.
Yeah, they have a lot of good investments there for sure. And the individual people who have invested through that crowdfunding platform or whatever.
It sounds like they've got several sort of Patreon-style things going on. They had the auction, of course, with the first devices where you could basically bid what you wanted. So they probably made some good bucks off that. So I think certainly from a financing perspective, they probably are, as you say, very, very sliver-thin margins on each phone.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So what's got me excited is that I think, I could see myself using this phone as my main phone. It's got enough of the tech and the specs that I consider to be necessary, like OIS, 120 hertz display, wireless charging, a decent processor, all that stuff. And then on top of that, I get a phone that's really unique and stands out, right, when I pull it out. So, if you're not into the hype, like neither of us are, like if you listeners are not into the hype, still consider this phone as a, solid device that is a statement in a way, right? Like you're pulling this out, people are going to notice. And I think that maybe is all we have to look at. Maybe that's how we see this phone for now, right? In the same way, I think the earbuds were fine. They just didn't do anything outstandingly great, but they were solid all around and affordable, good value. But then on top of that, you got this great design, right?
Yeah, and I think the real USP is something you've mentioned before, the fact you've got the wireless charging, because that is still pretty rare on a phone around the sort of £400 price point. You've basically got the iPhone SE 2022, which is just, no, I could never bring myself to use that thing ever.
I mean,
even
if
for
you
a
look
day
at it,
more.
right, here you're getting all the things that iPhone SE is missing, right? You're getting an OLED display at 120 hertz. You're getting a ultra wide is what I mean, camera in addition to the regular. And those to me are table stakes. Like at this point, you should have that. And thankfully, we don't have any sticker cams here. No 2 megapixel BS, stupid, useless macros or monochrome or depth sensors to just make the back of the phone look more fancy than it needs to be. And because I guess it's already fancy enough as it is. With an elephant in there, people are seeing an elephant. I don't know.
Yeah.
I see it. I'm just saying it's just kind of funny.
It's not an elephant to me. It's more like a naked Totoro swinging a big old dong around. That's what it looks like to me every time I see it. I just can't unsee it.
It's kind of true, right? Like it has a unique design, Kyle. Yes, it does.
Yes, it does. He's clearly an anime fan.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. So I mean, that's kind of my take, and I think that my audience knows this. We've all talked about this with my guests in the last few weeks about, what we expected it to be. And it's exactly that. So kudos to Carl for, even though there's so much hype and I think it's over the top and unnecessary, he did deliver what he promised, right? Like there was nothing in there that came as a bad surprise.
No, I mean, to be fair, with the number of leaks and everything as well, I think there was nothing left to surprise us the launch day.
It's true. Yeah, and that's I think that's a challenge, right? Like he knew that, and I think to some extent he knew he couldn't contain the leaks. And so I think in a way, by doing what he did, or what I should say the Nothing team, because it's certainly not just Carl, I think they managed that really well, right? Because to me, if I look back at the last few weeks of coverage, it's basically one big blur of, was that a leak or was that an official announcement? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. It all blurs.
Yeah, if you're able to blur that for even us who pay attention, the media, the YouTube creators, it's like you did it. You did it. Like you totally won, right? So I think in that sense, I think they did a good job. Yeah, it's a good team.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens going forwards, if they concentrate on the phones, if they try and do more devices, and if they stick with the flash and light sort of stuff, or if they try a different gimmick next time.
Yeah, I'm curious how they're going to develop it. I want to see, once we use this phone, you and I, for a few weeks, and we find some issues or whatever, can they fix them in a timely manner? Are we going to get software updates? Are they going to deliver on what they promised in terms of this experience, right? Like there's a Tesla integration right in the quick settings, which I'm going to try because I have a Tesla, but I'm really kind of curious if they can deliver more of these ecosystem integrations. It'll be really fascinating to see. So I'm excited about that. Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the Tesla thing as well, how many people would actually use that, because I always get the feeling that if you have enough bank to own a Tesla, you're probably going to go for a Galaxy S22 Ultra or a really top-end smartphone as opposed to a mid-ranger, but maybe this phone does enough to sort of sway you onto that. I'm not sure.
I honestly think that when you get to the level of specs that they're describing here on paper, it's, kind of neither here or there in terms of performance, unless you're a gamer and you absolutely need that, ROG phone or something.
That's serious grants,
That 778G Plus is going to deliver 90% of an 8 series performance, I think. And you're not going to notice. And for the kind of audience, that wants something unique and different, and a lot of the Tesla early adopters were like that. I think today it's a lot different because at least here in North America, Tesla is everywhere, at least in the big coastal cities. Like, there's like 1 out of 10 cars is like an electric car now. And Tesla obviously dominates. So, but there was a time when people bought Teslas because it was a statement. And I think in that sense, I think this is good marketing for them, for Nothing to have that connection, because I can see a good fit there. Yes, you can buy an iPhone. A lot of people are going to buy an iPhone. Yes, of course, the S22 series is kind of king of the roost in many ways. But especially in this market, we have a duopoly, right? Like in the US, for sure, it's Galaxy and iPhone. That's all you get from the carriers, right? But at the same time, if you want to be slightly different and you're an early adopter and you're tech savvy and you don't really need like the mega specs, this is a solid phone, I think. So why not? Why not have that partnership? It's interesting, right?
Yeah, cool. Yeah, no, it'd be yeah, definitely very interesting times, and that's what the smartphone world needs now is interesting times.
Yeah,
because too many clone phones out there, that's for sure.
100%. So the next topic is the MacBook Air M2. The reviews are out. I mean, I want to spend a bit of time on that. I don't know how much of a Mac user you are, have been, or if you even review Macs or what. But for me, as a longtime Mac user, but also an Android user, which is a weird thing, I'm excited about this laptop. I think it delivers everything that us Mac faithful, if you want to call us that, have wanted. And it's really nice to see Apple finally just nailing it yet again. I mean, the M1 MacBook Air was solid, but it was it lacked some pizzazz. Like it has they reused the old chassis, and it didn't have some of the things that had made Mac so great in the past, like MagSafe. So they brought all that back. And better webcam, which, I'm using an M1 MacBook Air right now. So the webcam is the 720p. Now, of course, Skype only records the 720p. So those of you watching this on Patreon right now, because yes, there is a video version of the podcast. In case you didn't know, folks, it's on Patreon, patreon.com/TNKGRL. One of the tiers, you should check it out. But the point is that, better webcam, better display, better speakers, MagSafe, newer processor, new form factor, all of that is very positive, but it does come with a slightly higher price, especially if you buy the right one, because you don't want to buy the entry level on this one. I don't understand why Apple, you've read this, right? I'm not sure if you have, but the M2 computers so far, both the Pro 13-inch and this Air, have a weird issue where to save money or whatever, if you buy the 256 gig storage version, you only get one NAND chip, and because of that, the bandwidth is reduced to half on the file I/O. So they're a little, you see that in the benchmarks. It's not as fast as the M1s were for file I/O at the same storage tier. So you have to go to the 512 gig storage tier to get two NAND chips to get back to that full bandwidth and everything. And I don't know why they did that, because I guess their rationale is that, the M2 chip is faster, the average user is not going to notice, especially if they buy the entry level. And they still sell the M1 entry level. So I suppose if you're smart and you can live without some of the new features, you're going to buy that. But that's the only thing that I have issues with on this computer as a Mac user, is like it's expensive because you have to buy the 512 version, which I would anyway because I need the storage, but not everybody needs to, right? And then it's weird NAND storage configuration, limitations is kind of un-Apple-like in the sense that they usually don't make these kind of compromises. So I guess maybe it's a supply chain issue thing too, right? They couldn't get the old chips, maybe are running out in terms of putting two smaller, to get the 256 on the base model. What's your take on all the reviews, and are you even a Mac user? Do you even care?
So as far as Mac goes, I've got a kind of a kind of a mixed relationship, I guess, with MacBooks. I do use MacBook daily. I've got the MacBook Pro with the M1 Max in it.
Oh, cool.
64 gigs of RAM, basically pretty much the top end model.
Is it the 16 or the 14?
This is the 16-inch, yeah. Biggest model, so it cost me best part of $5,000, I think it was in the end, yeah. Felt it that month. There was a lot of big beans on toast. And yet still every single day, Final Cut Pro crashes, it just dives on its arse, just memory throttle and all the rest of it. The battery life is woeful as well, which just does my head in. I can just about make it through an edit before that kills, and it's the size of this thing should be lasting longer than that. But I got it because, again, it got straight up 4.5 5-star reviews. Everyone's saying best performance ever. But then a lot of the reviewers, I guess they don't tend to use it for video editing and the really highly intensive tasks. It's more the sort of the entering stuff into their CMS and doing a bit of multitasking with the FaceTimes and all that. But yeah, I use it because I use Final Cut. Basically, that's the whole reason I use Macs. So I'm going to hold off on the M2 certainly to see how the long-term reviews come out and see if they're a bit more intensive in terms of the video side of things.
Yeah, I feel like for the video stuff I do, which is mostly, sometimes 4K, it's still mostly 1080. I can use a MacBook Air, even, and that's what I've been using as my travel computer for years. But I feel like I don't have the same kind of use cases. I honestly feel from everything I've heard from all my creative friends, like, feels people like Michael Fisher, who, Mr. Mobile, who use Final Cut and stuff, that you really want to use Final Cut or something optimized for these chips. One, and I think Premiere is better now, but it's still not as, I don't think it's still as optimized. I don't know about DaVinci. What are you using, by the way?
So yeah, I use Final Cut full time for the.
Oh, you do. So you're actually
video.
using.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good. But I've heard that everybody's telling me buy the 14 or 16 with the M1 Pro, not the Max.
Yeah.
Because you're getting better. It's the best compromise between performance and battery life.
And battery life, yeah.
The chip, like the part of the chip that lets you render video, is essentially the same, right? So you're when Final Cut is doing that big, difficult part at the end where it renders, that's really not going to buy you that much extra time, from what I understand, with the Max, and half the time you're just wasting battery power. So I think maybe that's the challenge here. Is I'm not quite sure why they would have made the Max chip in the first place in some ways,
Yeah,
I guess it was just to flex or something. See, like, look, this is what we can do on benchmarks, but
that's probably it. Yeah, I do regret it every single day of my life. Should have gone for that Pro.
You feel like you should have bought the Pro version, huh? The
never
M1
mind.
Pro.
But I would be tempted by the Air because, but yeah, as you say, you have to buy the bigger, faster SSD model.
For sure.
There's no point. 256 gigs, that's going to fill up in 2 seconds on Final Cut.
Well, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And 8 gigs of RAM, that's just
it's not enough.
So
exactly.
So then you're spunking out like $2,500 grand on a new laptop, which.
But it's interesting that you can bring the M2 Air up to 24 gigs now. And also interesting that, it's still a fanless machine, so you're going to throttle eventually. But I think for most of the kind of rendering we do, like our videos are like 10 minutes on YouTube, right? Roughly.
Yeah.
So I think you're not going to be in the throttling range unless you're doing like 8K or something. But for me, this MacBook Air is something I really want, even though I'm on an M1 Air that's just a year and a half old, because it's the little things, like the better webcam, the better display, the better speakers, the form factor that I feel is more attractive. And that's purely aesthetic and cosmetic and personal, but also the MagSafe. I've used enough older Macs with MagSafe. I'm not a clumsy person, but it's just so nice to have one extra port and also have that quick release, just pull on the cord and then you can, detether, as it were. Although battery life on that thing is going to be good enough that you're probably going to be on battery most of the time. But I feel like this computer is a bit of a love letter to the average Mac user, not necessarily the power user, in the same way as the MacBook Pro was a love letter, the 14 and 16 were a love letter to the creatives, to the hardcore artistic, typical Mac users, of what people kind of picture them to be. I think this is the bread and butter love letter, right? This is you want a computer that will kick ass no matter what you do, and most of your time is going to be the web. This is the computer, in the same way the M1 MacBook Air was. But the M1 MacBook Air, because of that recycled design, just didn't feel special. You know what I'm saying?
It felt like a halfway house kind of thing, didn't it? You can see what they were building up to, but
I have this here, and my spouse still has the Intel i5, just before, and the performance difference with the same specs is just ridiculously night and day. And they're totally jonesing for an M2 MacBook Air now, because they know they've seen the performance of my M1, and so we're gonna get them hooked up. But I kind of want to buy two. I'm gonna buy one for myself, simply because I just want those little tweaks. It's kind of like the Nothing Phone 1, like your little design things, like that bezel-less or equally bezeled display, like the little attention to detail that just, to me, makes that computer,
Yeah.
And it's like, I use some PCs sometimes that are really nice too. Like some of the Razors are really, well made, and they feel like they've really put a lot of effort. Or what was it? There was an Asus gaming PC, the G14 or something. Do you remember
There's
that?
been quite a few rock
with
ones
the like
recently,
little dot matrix display in the back of the lid.
Like
the
Zephyrus.
CS, like before COVID. And that thing, like, you know, again, like it's like the little things that make these computers special.
That draw you in.
Yeah. So I'm really super excited about this. And let's wait a few weeks till somebody says, oh, we found some incurable flaw because Apple,
Exactly.
But I hope that's not the case. And so far we know what the incurable flaw is. And that's something we saw with the reviews of the M2 Pro, the 13-inch, the weirdly irrelevant computer that has a touch bar and has the old design still. Because it's that NAND chip 256 story. And I think I just personally don't understand it. I think the only thing I can point at, the more I think about it, is supply chain issues. Because why would Apple make this compromise? After they've shown the world how good the M1 system could be, now they're making an M2, and essentially they're crippling it at the entry level, making you basically want to run right back at buying getting a deal, because you can get a deal on an M1 all day long right now. So why would you bother, right? Maybe it's a profit margin thing. Maybe it's also that they're like, well, people are just going to opt for the 512 and we're going to make more money. And there's still a tier down there at $999 US for the M1 if they want the old one. And I bet you can buy on Amazon like a refurb or whatever for $849 or something. At that price, I don't know what the prices are in pounds, but in the US here, it's kind of incredible. If you can buy a MacBook Air M1 refurb, even with just 8 gigs of RAM, and say 512 gigs of storage for $849, $899, like think about how much horsepower you're getting for your money. Like that is unbelievable.
Yeah. So, although in pounds that would probably be about £5,000 because the pound is just rubbish. It's just tanking, man.
But I mean, why would you spend $1,500 US, which is what you need to spend for the M2 with 512, right? Like at that point, the price gap is so huge that so I kind of feel almost like why they did it, I don't know, possibly supply chain issues, but at the same time, the end result is that they've created a vacuum there where you don't want the early one, the base model, and you either want to go to the old M1 or go all the way to the mid-range M2, and that's probably more profit for them. So I don't know, maybe there's a strategy there.
The cynic in me does think that they've deliberately done that for the base model, so they can say, hey, M2 Air from 1,299 quid, but actually it's really starting from 1,600 quid.
Yeah.
If you want the good one.
I mean, hopefully it goes down in price. They keep that chassis around for a few years like they have last time. And, like the lowest price on that, the old chassis, I think was $899 on one of the Intel models years ago.
Yeah.
US. So, because once they had honed, like once the tooling had been paid for, right? It was just like, it's a freebie at that point.
Churn them out.
Yeah, I mean, they really pulled this this design out stretched it so far. It's kind of crazy, the old one, right? Like, oh, yeah. I mean, how long was it? 12 years or something? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, well, they're still bringing back the old iPhone designs with the SE.
Yeah,
time
for sure.
And time again.
And I bet you that's part of the reason they can pack some of the better processors and stuff in there, because ultimately the rest of it is part spin, right? It's like, okay, like your chassis is the same, display is the same, camera module is the same.
Yeah, just scrape them out, just slap in the new A series, and then job done.
100%. So you reviewed the Xiaomi 12 Lite on your website. I received it under embargo as well. Expect a YouTube video soon, folks. I don't have much to say about it because I haven't had a chance to really play with it. I unboxed it, basically looked at it and was like, sexy. Just like last year's Mi 11 Lite. I like that phone too. So what's your takeaway?
Yeah, I mean, as you say, Xiaomi releases a lot of phones, especially around this sort of budget to mid-range area, and they do tend to be quite similar. Pretty solid phones, good value for money and everything, but after a while they just blur one into the other, and it's kind of hard to remember which is which. None of them have particularly standout features to differentiate them, but they are solid all-around phones. Kind of, again, like the Nothing phone, I guess. You got that OLED screen, which is really, really nice. You've got the good battery life. You've got the fast charging. You've got the respectable camera tech. It's a 108 megapixel camera, but typical Xiaomi, it does tend to struggle a bit in the sort of the softer
Doesn't have
light and
OIS
everything.
either, right? They didn't put that in there.
No, it doesn't have the OIS.
See,
so
this
things get a
is
bit
why I
blurry and
was
murky.
excited about the Poco, the last Poco flagship, right? Like the F4 they just released, because they went ahead and put OIS on that 64 megapixel sensor. And to me, that's a critical aspect of imaging. And low light, just, if you can keep that shutter speed, higher in terms of speed, then it's a bonus, because low light, sure, binning works, but up to a certain point, right?
Up to a point, yeah, exactly. And when, like if you're trying to take a shot in a bar or somewhere with a bit more ambient lighting, you've probably had a couple of beers, your hands are a little bit shaky. It's not even worth it. It's not going to come out well. So it was, but it was a typical Xiaomi phone in that it also came absolutely loaded with all the crapware. You're probably not going to get much in the way of the software support either.
No.
So that's another reason why you would probably go for the Nothing phone, because it's got obviously a fairly stock Android experience. They've got the dedicated software support. I think they said, was it 3 or 4 years of security updates on a 2 monthly rolling basis?
That's right, yeah.
Which is, really, really solid proposition. Whereas obviously Xiaomi doesn't offer the same level of support. It'll probably get Android 13. Will it get Android 14 beyond that? How long will you have to wait for Android 13? All the usual sort of little things that might sort of sway you away from Xiaomi and onto something like a OnePlus or a Samsung Galaxy instead.
Pricing very similar to the Nothing phone for the UK market then?
It's similar, yeah. I think at the moment the Xiaomi website is just pointing you at AliExpress, where it costs about 370 quid, so it's just a little bit cheaper.
A little bit cheaper.
Bit cheaper. So you've got the good, apparently the Nothing phone battery life's a bit meh. The Xiaomi 12 Lite, so the battery life's very good, and you've got the faster charging. So it sort of depends on what your priorities are.
But you don't have wireless charging, so it really depends.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't have OIS, you don't have wireless charging, but you have a bigger megapixel count, and you do have, also a slightly lesser processor. It's not the 778.
It's a 778G, just the standard G.
Yeah.
Standard G, yeah.
Standard G.
So it was still fine for gaming. I could even get Genshin and the rest running on it. It was fine. Did the job nicely. Occasional little judder in the UI and stuff, but how much of that is down to the chipset? How much of that is down to good old MIUI or Great Mate?
Yeah. No, I think, honestly, I have no complaints. It's also very thin and light. Like the previous the Mi 11 Lite last year was kind of a champion. Like, when I remember pulling it out of the box going like, oh, this is sexy. But not only is it sexy, it just feels like so, premium, because it was so light and thin. And, these are little things that a lot of you might not care about. My audience is pretty tech savvy and early adopters, so you're probably going for the specs. But trust me, sometimes the little details like that make you smile. You're like, oh, this is it feels so nice in hand because it's not as thick and not as bulky, So I don't know. I think this is pretty exciting to me. This phone, I'm going to hopefully get to play with it a little bit more in the next few days. I brought it along here with me on the trip. I'm going to Germany this weekend, so hopefully I'll play with it a bit. But honestly, look, I'm excited to see more well-made phones in this price point. Like, it's, again, like Reno with the Reno 8 Pro and the 7 Pro previously, they're going back to making these phones that don't compromise on, the build quality and the design. And for a while there, it was like they were all just cookie cutter, copies of each other with a plastic everything, frame, back, whatever, It says here, though, on GSM Arena's database that it's a plastic frame, which I know on the on Xiaomi, but it's also a plastic bag, they say. Is that right, or is that glass, you think?
In their official specs, they told me it was glass. They wouldn't say what kind of glass. They wouldn't say if it was Gorilla Glass or not, and I never got an official reply back from that. But they did state glass on the back end.
Yeah, so hopefully it is glass. But yeah, I do wish they would make a metal frame phone at this price point. It's just a small thing, but you're going to put it in a case anyway, most people. I get that, but it's just the principle of it. It's just like, come on, don't be a cheap, right? Like, look, nothing did it. Oppo is finally going back to doing it. Even Vivo, what was the V23 or something had metal frame.
Oh yeah, I like those V series
Yeah,
phones.
they're
They were really
nice
good.
this year, right? That's one of my
Yeah.
biggest video of 2022. Like I got something like 190,000 views on that unboxing
Ah,
video.
cool.
I don't know why. I always cover Vivo, but nobody ever gets so excited about these phones. So I was excited.
Yeah. Well, are they easy to pick up in the US? Because in the UK you have to import them still.
No,
pretty much.
we have to import them as well. Like we don't have any, like the only BBK group device we have officially is OnePlus here.
Yeah.
Right. And then the rest is, you can buy them on Amazon. Like you can get the Realmes and the Oppos. The Vivos are harder to find. You can get Xiaomi, Poco, Redmi on Amazon as well. But we don't officially have any Xiaomi phones here. We have Xiaomi or Mi branded products like the air purifiers and like all the ecosystem stuff, all their little stuff. But the phones don't exist. So phones, tablets, all that doesn't exist. Huawei sells their laptops here though, which is really interesting.
Oh, do they? Okay.
But they don't sell anything else. Like, so
I guess because the laptops, they're just straight up.
And they never sold their watches or earbuds or phones officially here. Although you can get everything that Huawei makes on Amazon, I think, imported. So it's weird. And see, now there's Honor too. I really don't know how easy it is to get Honor products here. I love them, but they're not officially sold here. They are officially sold in Europe though, right?
They're coming back now that
UK,
they've had that
right?
little
Okay.
separation with Huawei and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the next topic I want to kind of pick your brain about. I know you recently reviewed the Moto Edge 30, which is actually very similar to our Moto Edge Plus here, except that you have a lesser chip on yours, but the rest of the specs are almost identical. I'm not want to get into that simply because I want to talk about the more exciting Moto announcement. Well, not announcement, but they showed off their Razr 3 in public, showcased it at a conference or something. And I kind of want to get your take on that. Like, it's not so much about the phone specifically, but like how did Moto drop the ball? They were the first ones to do a flip fold, right? And then Samsung came along and Samsung has nailed this, right? The Z Flip 3 today, I still think, even though it's about to get replaced by the Z Flip 4, is such a good phone in every way. Like you cannot argue about that phone being good. And yet Moto is like the Razr 5G, like I think the only person I know who uses one regularly is Michael Fisher, Mr. Mobile. That's it.
Oh, does he? And I'm assuming it's like a secondary backup phone because the battery life on that thing was woeful.
Yeah, I think he uses it on weekends. But, the thing is, this is supposedly a new Razr design. But the rumors are, that's what I'm hearing, is that it's not coming to the West. This is going to be a China-only device. And the form factor is, it does certainly look like a flip phone. Like, it's more like the Samsung now in terms, it doesn't have the chin anymore. And that's kind of what this, news item reveals. But at the same time, I think it's wider or something. So it's not like as user-friendly as the Flip from Samsung is or as the original Razr is. Because the original Razr is pretty compact. That's the one thing I like about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I hear. It's hard to tell from the photos, though, right?
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, as you say, it's just like Samsung in 3 generations. They've refined the originals and they've made them so nice.
It's water resistant. How the hell did they manage to do that?
How is that even possible? I don't know. They're crazy. They're magicians. They absolutely are.
So I'm not feeling too excited about that, but I just wanted to mention those of you who are following and looking forward to maybe having this Razr, don't hold your breath. I think this is going to be China only, and it's not going to be the sleek and slim and sexy flip-like phone. So save your money for the Flip 4 if you're buying a flip phone the next year, basically. Or get a super discounted deal on the Flip 3. I got one for $180.
What? Are you kidding me?
Let me explain. You can trade in as many phones as you want to bring the price down. So I went through my
review,
parts
you've got a few
bin.
kicking about.
I went through my parts bin and I'm like, what do I have here that's not a review unit that I can actually get rid of? And I was like, oh, I've got a Galaxy S21, the original, new in box, never used. Okay.
Oh, perfect.
And I've got, I don't know where that came from, but it's not a review unit. And then I had like an old LG V60 on AT&T, locked to AT&T. And those two traded in. It brought the price down on the Samsung website to $180. And it's unlocked. And I got a pair of Galaxy Buds 2 for free as well.
Brilliant. I love how they give away the Galaxy Buds with everything.
Yeah, I know. But I mean, it's kind of crazy. So I think, don't wait for the Razr. Just get yourself a Flip now, or wait for the Flip 4 if you want the latest. Although I have a feeling the Flip 4 is just going to have a Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 or 8 Plus Gen 1, and it's going to have a slightly better camera. But I really don't think you should expect too much of a change, because how can you best the Flip 3, right?
Oh, it'll be a minor incremental upgrade at best.
It has to be incremental. I think they finally have come to a design that I think is solid. I think we're going to get more customization options potentially from Samsung, in the sense that you'll be able to pick your colors to get a bespoke model manufactured. That's something that they started doing with the Z Flip 3, but I think we're going to see that with the Z Flip 4 more so. That's my hunch. But overall, look, Moto, I can't believe that they lost this opportunity. They were the first. Like, why?
Breaks my heart.
I know.
Yeah,
I like
because they had the amount
Moto.
of hype around that first one as well. It was like nothing phone levels. Like everyone wanted a piece of that Motorola Razr. I remember the journalists like knocking down the door, pretty much trying to get a hands on with it.
I did, and they wouldn't give us review units too. They were super hard to get your hands on review units. I got mine from the carriers. I got AT&T to send me one, locked, which was a pain, but I was just like, you know what? I need to play with this and get my opinions on, Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But then skip forward 2 months and they were literally giving them away in a buy one, get one free offer on the Motorola website. It's like, what happened, guys?
I know, it's so sad. Yeah, so speaking of other launches this week, we talked about this last week. You knew it was coming, but RedMagic has their 7S series out and in China now, and essentially it's the same as this S series, but with a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1. Duh. So I actually compared the specs, and I believe that's the only difference.
Oh, did the original 7 also have a stupid amount of memory stuffed inside as well?
Yeah. No, all these gaming phones are the same for that, so that's not new. But it's just
18 gigs? Did it go up to 18 gigs?
I think so.
Oh my God. Why? I've got gaming laptops that don't have that much
I know.
memory.
Most of my computers, I think, top out at 16 gigs here.
Yeah.
But okay, so you can get the RedMagic 7S Pro in China. That means it's going to be launched globally soon, I have a feeling. And, honestly, if you can't afford the ROG phone and you don't, for some reason, don't want the Blackmagic phones from Xiaomi, this is probably a good bet. I mean, the software is never going to get updated. It's going to continue being weird and buggy. The camera is going to suck. But in terms of value, for if you just want a game, this is the RedMagic. You can't beat on value. They're also officially sold in the US with official 5G support, which for us is very rare for a Chinese company. So keep that in mind if you're shopping for a gaming phone and you're kind of trying to decide, I can't really afford the ROG phone. It's so nice. Or you can maybe not, you don't feel like into the Black Shark. This might be your savior, as long as you know what to expect. It's like, don't expect software update. Don't expect the camera to be any good. But everything else should be pretty solid.
What camera sensor does it use? Is it the 766 like everything else at the moment?
No, not even. So for a while they were using the 686. Do you remember that sensor?
Oh,
the 64 megapixel from Sony. It's a 586, but with 64 megapixel, right? Yeah. And that was solid. That was decent. And if you installed the Google camera APK, it actually delivered because it was one of those supported sensors. But then they went to, I think, an OmniVision or Samsung that's 64 megapixel, starting with the RedMagic 6 series. So the 6R, 6 Pro, and then all the 7s since the 7, 7S, 7S Pro, 7 Pro, all of those have this really crappy, I think it's a Samsung with a 0.7 microns. The one we see on a lot of Xiaomi phones, on Moto phones, and it's just like,
what is this?
It's not good. It's just not good. And of course, their image processing is terrible to start with. So, you can throw the Google camera APK at it, but it doesn't support a lot of the features because it's not one of the supported sensors. Yeah. So in a way, they've stepped back. And I think that was a cost saving for them because that IMX 686 can't be a cheap sensor. It's it's old now. But I still think, Anyway. Yeah, so I don't want to get too excited about the RedMagic other than, yeah, you can get an 8 Plus Gen 1 now if you spend a little more money and or wait until it comes to North America or Europe.
Yeah, I get the feeling it's probably not going to be much cheaper than the ROG Phone over here as well. They tend to still be quite pricey. Yeah, you definitely want to go for the Black Sharks if you want to get a good gaming device, but at more of a mid-range price.
I honestly think if you're into gaming and you want to save money and get a solid phone, get a Snapdragon 870 phone. Like, I feel like you're getting better thermal management than the 888. And yes, it's not going to be as punchy as an 8 Gen 1 or 8 Plus Gen 1. And I think the 8 Plus Gen 1 is probably the one I would pick over the latest two gens because it's built by TSMC and it's got a slightly better power management. So it's a bit better on battery and a bit better on thermals. But I would go 870. It's essentially an 865 plus, right? And it's just so well tuned, so solid, more than enough. And also thermals are really, really good on it. So you don't have to worry too much about having to come up with special thermal management and like a fan. Like the RedMagics have the fan built in, which I think is actually a pretty cool gimmick. It's not a gimmick, is what I'm saying. It's actually useful.
It's fun,
like, when I benchmarked the 6 last year, with the fan, you couldn't throttle it if the fan was running. It just kept delivering that solid performance. I ran that, whatever that benchmark is, the 3D Mark, where you can do the sustained throttle test, and it wouldn't throttle. And then if you turn off the fan, get this, it would stay to 90% of its performance after 20 minutes, even with the fan turned off, which was really remarkable. So the cooling itself on these RedMagic phones to start with is really good.
Pretty solid,
and then they throw the fan in there on top of it. So it's pretty great.
Yeah, the only time the fan is bad is if you're trying to do some gaming in bed and there's someone trying to get to sleep next to you. They don't like that very much.
Oh, yeah, it sounds like...
It's like a friggin' UFO taken off from your bedroom.
It's hard to describe. It's like an air noise, but also a jet-like noise. Like it's got this high-pitched whine to it. And it's, exactly. You did it right. It's just interesting. Then the next thing, and this is actually a big topic. I think we can spend a few minutes on this. Like, okay, there's very strong rumors that Samsung's dropping Exynos on the next flagship. I know, for you guys, this is a huge deal, right? Because we always get the good stuff.
Swear to God, when I read this story, I danced a jig. I danced a bloody jig in my front room. I was so happy.
No, I mean, I think it's true. I think it's going to happen. And
it must do.
It must happen. It's sad to say this, but I had this discussion on the podcast, I think the last couple of weeks now. If you're hearing drilling noise, folks, that's because they're construction in my apartment building. Hopefully it's not too loud.
Oh, so someone playing on a RedMagic smartphone nearby.
Yeah. That's the fan on the RedMagic. It sounds like somebody's drilling your teeth. But no, seriously, like I think the thing that's interesting to me here is that, we are looking at the Tensor chip, right? Like I've been saying for the last two podcasts that I'm not happy with the performance of Tensor. Like I'm a Pixel 6 Pro user. I love my Pixel 6 Pro. I've had few of the bugs people are having, but I feel like battery life is not that great, especially now after 6 months or so.
I found it's dropped a bit as well. It was fine to begin with.
I think it might be a software update that did it because it's been worse specifically in the last 2 months for me.
Yeah.
And then honestly, I'm like, why couldn't they have made a Snapdragon version of that phone? It just would be so much better. Like it's already a great phone, but like why did Google have to go in bed with Samsung? The biggest issue I have is the 5G radio. It is a year and a half old. And now that we're starting to get really solid 5G in the US, like mid-band as well, where you can get like multi-100 megabits per second. We also have millimeter wave, but that's always been super fast, but you have to basically be sitting under an antenna for it to work.
Yeah.
But the mid-band stuff, I'm really noticing the difference in performance between an equivalent Snapdragon phone. Yeah. On the sub 6 low band, it's LTE on steroids. You're not going to notice a huge difference anyway. But I think
that's all we've got over here. So I find my 5G performance on the Pixel is the same as any other smartphone.
Yeah, well, it's so much better with Qualcomm. Believe me, like you hang on to signals better. You get better signal strength in fringe cases. It's just the Tensor and the Exynos just don't deliver there, and that's my biggest gripe with Google. And I know that they're trying to create their own eventually possibly their own chipset in-house, completely independent of Samsung, and this is the first step. But why didn't they go to bed with the Qualcomm to make that happen?
I don't know. Only Google can answer that one, unfortunately.
I'm kind of, don't get, even MediaTek. MediaTek's doing some great stuff with Dimensity 9000 and 8100. I know. Like, what? Oh.
Yeah, it blows my mind. Because, again, all they needed to do was read some reviews of the British Samsung smartphones where every single review says, it's a great phone, but import it from America because the Exodus version sucks. Battery life's rubbish, the performance isn't as good, and just year after year, I get sick of hearing myself say it, because every single year it's the same sorry state of affairs. Apart from hopefully next year, well, it'll be Snapdragon all the way.
Well, I'm looking forward to all of you UK reviewers jumping up and down with joy when
my video will literally be 5 minutes of me dancing that jig. It'll just be me, Snapdragon, yeah! Finally.
I can't wait to see it. This is cool.
My God. Just the relief.
Yeah, so that's good news, and it makes perfect sense to me. Like, I don't think Samsung is in a place where they can compete with, Qualcomm or even MediaTek at this point. That ship has sailed, and that's why, of all the people Google could have picked, like, seriously?
Any of them, apart from, put a couple of the weird ones. There was one I came across the other day on the Poco C40, I think it was. I'd never even heard of this company before. It was like JBQ or something like that. Oh,
yeah. Okay. So, I didn't include that topic in there because I got that phone as well. And I played with it like for a day. I took it out and about for a day only because I didn't have time. But honestly, my experience was great with that phone. I mean, for what it is, right? Okay. For the cost, I was like, this is, I took some photos of that phone, and with a minor amount of Google Photos editing, I was really impressed with what it delivered, honestly. I guess I was just expecting something way worse when I saw the specs like and the price and the unknown processor. Yes, it is very slow, but if you set your expectations accordingly, right? If you know what you're getting yourself into, honestly, I was impressed with what you get for the money. Like, I don't know. I don't want to dismiss that C40 just yet. I know you had a pretty bad experience with it, though.
Oh my God.
Of bugs.
I used it for 2 days, and just the endless bugs. Every time I loaded Twitter, even the Twitter logo didn't show up. It was just like, nope, I'm nothing to do with this.
I'm going to put the link on the show notes, because I'm going to also link to your Xiaomi 12 Lite review, and then I'm going to now talk about something that you also talked about, which is kind of cool, because I didn't even know about this until you brought it up when we were talking on Twitter about the podcast, is the new Nokia dumb phones or feature phones. And one of them has built-in earbuds. You made a video. Tell us about it.
I did. So this is the Nokia 5710 Express Audio, which is it's kind of like a refined 4G version of some of the original 5000 series feature phones from well back in the day. And the main gimmick of this thing, the headline stealer, kind of like the flashing disco lights on the Nothing phone, is the fact that you've got a little flap on the back, you flick it down, and there's a pair of true wireless earbuds.
This is amazing. This is such a good idea. I love it.
Yeah. It is a great idea, because the number of times you go out and you've either forgotten your headphones or your headphones are dead, and it's like, oh, well, guess what? I just flip this down. Here we go. Good to go. They're Bluetooth 5.0. They also work with other devices as well as just the feature phone. And then when you're done with them, you stick them back in the phone, flip up the little flap, and they charge using the phone's battery, which is quite cool.
And I love that they've rekindled the Express branding. Like, it used to be Express Music on the 5800. I still have one of those in storage somewhere. Mint, new in box. Like, just because it was such an iconic phone for its time.
Collector's item, yeah.
Yeah. So this is 5710 Express Audio, not Express
Audio,
Music.
yeah, which I almost ballsed up because I was writing it in the script as Express Music because I'm so used to that branding. And then I was like, hang on a second, I'm sure they said Express. Oh, yeah. Let's not do that. Because a couple of times I've gone through an entire video called a phone by completely the wrong name. And that makes for an interesting edit.
In terms of the phone itself, like, it's a feature phone. Does it have some kind of OS like some of these more recent HMD Nokias that have minimal apps, like you can install WhatsApp and stuff? Is that the same kind of OS, or is it just totally dumb S40 dumb phone?
So it's got the Series 30 Plus. They did tell us in the briefer that it would support WhatsApp, just kind of a version of WhatsApp. But then their PRs got in touch with me when they saw my video and said that it doesn't support WhatsApp, which is a bit of a shame. So it sounds like it's a very closed ecosystem, basically. But it's got the 4G, it's got the voice over LTE. So if you just want a burner phone type thing that take to festivals and stuff like that, you got your buds and all of that. Sounds like it could be a fun little secondary device.
Yeah, no, I think it's exciting. Folks, go watch Chris's video. I think this
Please
is
do.
a pretty cool phone. And, that's really all I have to say about it. I'm just excited that somebody, and it had to be Nokia in a way, right? But
Oh
that
yeah.
somebody went ahead and just kind of gave us this crazy form factor. And it's such a smart, for this market, like I know, how much is that phone?
So it's £79, so probably about like $20 or something.
That's nothing. Like that's like exactly that's burner phone tear. You just put that in your glove box, in the
Yeah.
car, and so that way if you need an emergency phone, you have it,
It's
and you
right
have
there.
earbuds, so you can take all your calls like a boss.
Exactly, yeah. I just kind of hope that it doesn't absolutely drain the phone's battery, because that's one of the good things about the Nokia burner phones is that they go on for like a month, 2 months on a single charge. Whereas I guess if you're using the buds, that's going to sap it a bit faster, but it should still hopefully get a good week or so, even with plenty of playback, you would hope.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And then the nice thing too is that you can just store, like, put an SD card in there with a little bit of music, and you got some tunes ready to go whenever you need them.
And you will need an SD card, because I think it's only got about 128 megs of memory or something like that. So yeah, you fit about
Yeah.
3 songs on there probably.
Yikes. Does it have a headphone jack though? Because they obviously have the built-in earbuds.
I believe they do have a headphone jack as well, although I could be getting that confused with one of the other feature phones. They launched like 3 feature phones, including a flip phone style one as well at the same time. So yeah, they all had very similar specs though.
Well, I'm kind of glad to see that Nokia is still like playing a little bit here, having fun with things. And,
Oh god, yeah.
and I'm glad they were able to pull back the licensing Microsoft had inherited for the feature phones. They got that back.
Something
Right?
like that,
Because
yeah.
I think
It's a
the
bit of a
original
muddled
deal
mess.
was Microsoft kept that part of the business, but they somehow managed to buy it off or something. I'm glad because, it's nice to have all the mobile HMD stuff on, like, Nokia branded stuff under one roof in a way.
Yeah,
Right? Yeah.
definitely. Yeah, classics.
Cool. Well, listen, Chris, we're pretty close to wrapping up. I would love to hear from you where folks can find you on social media, like all your handles, your YouTube channel, all that. Tell people in the world where you are.
Well, I guess if okay, so you can find me on YouTube, just TechSpurt, 2 separate words. You can also find me on the Twitters at TechSpurt Video, and I believe it's the same handle for TikTok, where I've done an almighty 2 TikTok videos so far. I might do some more. We'll see how it goes.
Have you become a TikTok superstar yet, Chris?
I have not. I've got about 30 followers, but that's not bad, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, that's pretty good. I mean, I'm just looking at Enobong's success, bored at work on TikTok,
Right.
and I'm just like, where did that come from? It's pretty awesome. Like it's such a fun platform in many ways. I am completely incapable of leveraging that platform at this point. I just have a hard time wrapping myself around the audiences and what they want. It's just such a
Yes.
challenge.
It's a whole different world, but I'm going to try and do maybe some launch event videos and things like that, more sort of behind the scenes type stuff, I guess. It seems like it could be a good platform for that.
For sure. That's just my way of saying, get off my lawn, kids.
Yeah. You pesky kids.
You whippersnappers. But yeah, you folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl on Twitter and Instagram. That's TNKGRL. Think comic book character Tankgirl. Drop all the vowels and you'll get my handle. It's easy. So Twitter is where you should speak with me and Chris about this podcast if you have any comments or mentions. And Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phones, pretty pictures of tech, pretty pictures of cars, all taken with phones because I try to do that. And the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're also on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify, basically everywhere good podcasts can be found. So please, if your app lets you rate or review the podcast, please do so. Tell your friends about the podcast so they actually subscribe. That helps us a lot. Then, of course, there's a couple of YouTube channels that go alongside the podcast. There's youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast and youtube.com/mobiletechmore. You know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the little notification bell, comment in the videos, comment about the podcast if you want. The videos are basically just like a visual supplement to the podcast. If you want to see those phones that we discussed on the show, those that I have, you'll see an unboxing. So check it out. And then the other channel, the More channel, is all the accessories, kind of like the peripheral stuff, travel tech, car tech, home automation, that kind of stuff. So basically, there's stuff there for everyone. And Patreon is another thing. If you want to help out the podcast, the best way to do it is with Patreon. Patreon.com/tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. So there's a bunch of tiers there. There's the video version I mentioned before. If you want to see the podcast on video and get it before the audio version, like a day or two early, and more punk rock, rough and tumble, less edited, that's where you're going to find it on Patreon. Please consider joining Patreon for that. And then, of course, there's a Discord server you can join. That's another tier as well. Check out the tiers. Help out if you can. I'd appreciate it. You know, I can't do this without your help, so think about it. If you don't like Patreon, I totally understand. That's cool. You have other options. One of them is I have a PayPal link in the show notes. You can click on PayPal link and make me a $5 donation for a coffee or something. I love my coffees. I want to thank Audible, our sponsor. Audible has been with us since the early days of the show, and they're wonderful. So they have a great URL for us. It's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. And if you go there, you'll get a 30-day free trial. You get to keep a book at the end. So consider basically helping out if you can by joining Audible if you haven't already done so. The reason I love Audible is because I'm a reader. I like to read, but as I'm, my schedule just doesn't allow me to read anymore. I just at the end of the day, I'm just tired. My eyes don't want to be staring at another screen. So what do? I put on headphones or earbuds and I just listen to a book, basically. They have, of course, long form books. They have some shorter form content. They have podcasts. They have a whole bunch of stuff. The nice thing about it is, it is well curated. Some of the books are read by the authors. If you want kind of an epic experience because you want to do a long road trip, like in the US and Canada, we have these great distances to travel. So imagine you're in London, UK, and you want to drive all the way to Barcelona. That's a long road trip. Well, you can listen to, you can just erase an entire Audible book from your queue by just spending 9 hours while driving. So it's another reason to look at Audible if you are not yet a subscriber. The URL is audibletrial.com/mobiletech. So please consider helping out. And I want to thank Audible again for being our longtime sponsor. And Chris, thank you for being my guest on the show. I really appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's been a fantastic chance to chat with you for a start, because I don't really get over to the US very much at all these days. Saw you briefly about a month or so ago. But yeah, that's the first time in years, it feels.
I was really surprised that you were there, and that was so exciting to me. I was like, I got to get you on the show now. We've been talking about it for a while anyway. So, folks, stay tuned. I'll have Chris on at some point in the future. And, of course, we'll have another show next week. But until then, cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.